Right, so what's the program for today, for this morning? For the next 3/4 of an hour, I'll do an overview of our activities, what we plan to do in the next few months, and offer some opportunities in the VSC and beyond, and present the user poll results. And at about 11 o'clock, Nick Verreke will do a talk on his research regarding mycoplasma and brachyspira, whatever that means. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. And if you could please mute your mic for the moment, or raise your hand if you have a question, and then we can come to you. Thanks. So who are we? For those of you who do not really know who we are, we're part of the ICT department, infrastructure office, and our aim is to provide centralized scientific computing services, training and support for researchers researchers from Ghent University, also for industry and other knowledge institutes. We're currently 9 staff members, but we also do take on part-time consultancy from Inuits who we've engaged over the last year and a half to help with user support, with software installations mainly. And from time to time, we also employ job students who help along with specific implementations. What are our main tasks? Well, user support, helping you support via training, and also infrastructure installation and upkeep. And this is with respect to software and hardware. We also do outreach and marketing. This is mainly showing what HPC is, trying to promote use of HPC throughout Flanders. And of course, we collaborate with other supercomputing centers. What have been the main operations that we have engaged in 2020 and that are currently still ongoing? Topically, the biggest part is Tier 2, which is the services which we provide at Ghent University. So the HPC there and everything related to that. But 2 other big projects have popped up. I think I informed you on that last time in the last user meeting. So we had the Tier 1 compute for the VSC, which we're building as Ghent University. We're taking on the engagement to install the next Tier 1 supercomputer for the Flemish Supercomputer Center, and also the Tier 1 cloud, which is a new infrastructure, and I'll come back to that later on. For Ghent University, we're also taking on the task of acting as a research data management liaison. So we're not the data stewards. I want to stress that, but we try and optimize the offer of ICT department with respect to research data management. And beyond Flanders, we've also taken up a role in the EuroCC project of the Euro HPC joint undertaking. I'll also say a bit on that later on. But these are the main topics which we have been involved in and we're currently still ongoing. So what are the biggest infrastructure changes which have happened in the last year and beginning of this year? So we've reworked the InfiniBand network, which is the high-speed network underpinning all infrastructure and connecting everything. A lot of work which you probably didn't even see, but this is quite important to keep this top-notch. General maintenance and update works. I hope the impact of that has not been too much for you, but it's quite important that we keep the systems up to date. And then featureful changes, so a new larger storage, currently at 3.75 petabytes of usable space, There is the new fast scratch area Arcanine, 70 terabytes of very fast storage for I/O intensive jobs. And there is also now a connection between the HPC storage and the general dict shares. Also Globus, which is also a new feature. Again, I'll highlight those. New clusters, so cluster FanPy and Gollet have gone out of life, and we've replaced them. There's a new GPU cluster Joltic, which has gone into production. There's big memory cluster Kirlia in production, which replaces FanPy, and the new CPU cluster Doduo, which replaces Gollet. For those of you who haven't really realized, there are three new clusters. So Joltic is a GPU cluster, which means it's rather small in the amount of nodes, but the cost mainly is in the GPUs. So 40 GPUs in all, NVIDIA Volta V100 GPUs, quite a bit of memory per node. Kirlia is the big memory cluster, so 738 gigabytes per node. Also, again, a limited number of nodes here. And then Doduo is the big whopper, replacing Gollet with 128 nodes, a total of 12,000 CPU cores. Do note, these are AMD CPUs, so probably or possibly your software needs some modifications there. What's been the cluster usage in 2020? So I'm trying to go quite briefly here. In general, on average, we're reaching like 70 to 80% of effective used percentage. Although this is an underestimate, we actually do not really account for. Well, this is or the downtime is actually overestimated here. So these percentages should probably go a little bit up, but in general, 70 to 80% is not that bad. We do see slow uptake of the new clusters, which is quite normal, but the ones that are in full production typically reach that percentage. As I mentioned earlier, we provide services for Ghent University, but also other research institutes. As you can see in the percentages there, it's still mostly Ghent University that uses the infrastructure, which is not at all a problem, but it's useful to consider that. I also wanted to highlight that we do offer services for master and bachelor students, so the HPC infrastructure is really open for students. The percentage is quite limited, as you can see, so 2.60% of all CPU time goes to masters and bachelor students. And this is quite important because they are budding researchers. Help desk, quite important statistics which we always track. So in 2020 we received close to 1,800 tickets. A lot of them relating to account and quota issues and software installations, and then the general classification other, which is quite difficult to pinpoint specific issues there, but anyway. Busy spells have been mostly in April 2020, which is the start of the Corona crisis, which has, we have noticed this as well in the help desk, where we've seen an increased demand. The average time to resolution, it's in general, I think it's quite okay. So we reach about 80% of all tickets are closed or resolved after about 2 days, which is quite fast in my opinion. But as you can see, there is a small peak still at 2 weeks and 4 weeks. And what is this due to? Well, quite clearly, software installations. Software installations, they take a lot of time. We have received 266 requests over the last year. And this is more than we can actually cope with our staff only. So hence we have engaged Inuit consultants who help out with this. To give you an idea on how complicated this can be, on average, so really on average, every software installation takes about 7 hours of time. But this 7 hours is an average, so it effectively there's a quite broad spectrum there. So some installations might take minutes, others can take days or even weeks. But we do understand this represents a waiting time for you. We try to do our best here to pick it up, but yeah, the amount is quite staggering to keep up with, in all honesty. More information on usage and how what 2020 was like, you can find in the annual review, which will soon be published, so any day now. Any comments on that are also welcome. But I wanted to specifically highlight a couple of features which are either new or, well, hidden but not on purpose, which we haven't really said much about. So students and courses, UGent shares and the HPC-UGent connection, Globus, XDMod, and HPC-UGent web portal. Students and courses, I wanted to again repeat that HPC-UGent is there for students. Students can really connect. You can use it. You can use their infrastructure in your classes, but our service level remains best effort. It's very expensive to duplicate everything, and it's beyond what we currently can do. Some changes here. So student accounts in the old days had to get approval from their professor before they could get an account. That's no longer necessary. So student accounts can simply are simply approved by default. We often get the question, I want to do a practical session, but it's not practical that my students have to wait in the queue. Well, for that, we can offer reservations. So reservations for practical sessions only. Your reservation must be made at least in a week in advance, but then we can reserve some dedicated resources for the duration of the practical session only. There's a reservation form on the account page. You can find the link in this presentation, which is, by the way, already available on the website. Another thing I wanted to highlight, which is direct consequence of liaising with the data stewards and research data management movement within Ghent University, is this shares connection. So possibly some of you have UGent shares, or your research group has certain shares, and we have received several times the request, can we connect these two? Well, this is now possible. It's covered in chapter 625 of the documentation. You can mount the shares on your HPC storage. So not the other way around, which is a bit weird, but that's the way it is. So within the HPC-UGent interface, you can mount the share system and read and write data there. Do beware though, the file systems between these two storage platforms differ. That means you have to set permissions separately on the platforms. And if you want to keep your HPC-UGent attributes, your file attributes, you have to zip, for instance, when you back up or something. So please be aware of that. But more information in this chapter. And again, all comments or questions are welcome by mail to the help desk. Another thing I wanted to highlight is Globus. This is not really tier 2 matter, it's actually tier 1 matter, but I find it most apt to mention here. So within the VESC, it's now possible to easily transfer files between so-called endpoints with the Globus interface. All documentation is in the link at the top here. So this is transfer in the background. That means, for instance, if you want to transfer files from a storage platform on Brainiac on the tier 1 system, and you want to bring it to somewhere else, you don't necessarily need to bypass your laptop. You can do it via the Globus background. So you can define multiple endpoints. You can actually define your laptop as well as an endpoint, which offers the opportunity to transfer files in the background towards your laptop if you do want to make then a huge file transfer to a certain device. But you can also easily interconnect between them using a graphical user interface. XDMod, so we often get the question, how much compute time am I using, or am I using my nodes in an effective way, and so on. Using the XDMod portal, which is really new, you can get information on that. So you can get information on, for instance, the total amount of CPU or GPU hours you've used, also your waiting time, the job size, which resources you've used mostly. The information is only there for your personal VSC ID. Please be aware. And currently, access is only possible using UGent VPN. That means we are, that means some users possibly might not be able to connect here, but please get in touch with us on that. Connection is via shieldon.ugent.be/xdmod, and then you can get nice and easy plots. It's quite straightforward to get plots from that, to get information from it. We obviously also use it ourselves, so all the information in the year report is compiled using XDMod. And finally, and maybe the most impactful, is the HPC-UGent web portal, covered in chapter 8 of the tutorial. This is an implementation which we have been working on for more than 2 years, I guess. It's a web portal, so it's web-based access to the HPC-UGent infrastructure. And it sort of is a killer for the terminal. So you actually do not need a terminal anymore. You can simply use a browser, upload and download files by drag and drop. You can create, edit, submit, or monitor your jobs there. And most importantly, this is the go-to application to run interactive or graphical user interface application. We have a number of interactive apps already installed. Again, these take a bit of time to get them configured, but it's quite possible also to have your own and start your own graphical user interfaces. If you really want, you can also open a terminal within the browser. This one is available either by first connecting to UGent VPN or the VESC firewall app, and then connecting simply in a browser to login.hpc.ugent.be. Please note that it's currently marked still as beta in the documentation, and this is to some extent true. It's not complete unstable, but there are certain nuts and bolts which we need to get further grips on, and we're not really quite confident yet, as we are with the other infrastructure. But please, by all means, do use it, and if you see something that's off, do tell us. But definitely worth a shot and connecting to it. 2021, or the remainder of 2021, what are we going to do? We're going to install a new GPU cluster, or at least buy a new GPU cluster and start installation on it. Probably this will only be available in 2022. This in response to the increased demand for GPU resources. We're working on a debug interactive cluster called Slacking, which will enable you to start immediately, but so there is no real queue there, but the amount of resources you will be able to get there is limited, and will also, the speed of the cluster will also depend on how much demand there is. We want to consolidate the HPC web portal. What do I mean with that? We want to make sure that we get the remaining bugs out and make it more stable, at least to more to our liking and our quality standards, and also incorporate it better into our training, for instance. We want to start work on a UGent cloud infrastructure. More on that later, but in short, the purpose here is to have VMs and dedicated resources like that, so cloud-like manner for UGent only. And of course, elephant in the room, there are two big projects for the VSC which we're doing. So the Tier 1 Compute Hortense, for which we will do operations and management. This will be a lot of work for us. And the VSC Tier 1 Cloud, which was launched a couple of weeks ago, we also do operations and management for that. Even though the majority of infrastructure is ready, this requires still a lot of tinkering, and the management, of course, takes a lot of work as well. Which brings me to the VSC, so the Flemish Supercomputer Center. Possibly some of you do not know this yet. This is a partnership between the Flemish University Associations. It manages Tier 1 and Tier 2 level infrastructure in 4 hubs, and it's managed by FWO. The mission is quite similar to what the mission is of HPC-UGent, so encouraging the use of HPC in Flanders and beyond. In 2019, a governance restructure has been issued, and this is now quite finalized, which you can see here. So how is Ghent University represented in the governance of the VSC? So there's Johan van Kamp, who is the or representative in the high-end computing board, which is our strategic organ of the VSC. Then I am the part of the local operational team covering the Tier 2. So colleague Steen de Weert is member for the Tier 1 operational team, so he's mostly focused on the Tier 1 operations, quite a bit of work there. And this is quite new, and I wanted to really highlight it here. Dr. Jan Goedgebuur is our representative for Ghent University in the User Council, and he should also normally, if it all went well, be present in this meeting. If you have specific topics that you want to address within or get addressed within the user meeting, he's very welcome to receive your feedback. Tier 1, so VSC infrastructure, the prime infrastructure, so the infrastructure that is most open for everyone within Flanders is the Tier 1. This is part of an impulse investment called Supercomputing as a Service, so project for 4 years, 2018 to 2022, covering 3 aspects. So basically compute, classical compute as we are mostly used to it. But in addition, cloud and Tier 1 data, and the purpose is, of course, integrating these 3 aspects into one platform. Work is still in progress. It's quite a daunting task. The Tier 1 cloud is ready, which is being managed by Ghent University. There are 2 Tier 1 computers in the running, so the Brainiac is currently still actively being supported by KU Leuven, doing a very good job. And new and quite, I hope quite soon, we will see Hortense coming to Ghent University in an active fashion. Our colleagues at KU Leuven are also building a Tier 1 data platform, which enables you to easily reach storage. I'm not going to go further into detail on that. I wanted to highlight the 2 parts that Ghent University is doing. So Tier 1 Compute Hortense, up to a couple of months ago, this supercomputer looked very much like the picture you see at the top, so boxes in our data center. And I'm very happy to announce that the infrastructure is currently actually installed in our data center and is being tested. but we're still quite some time away from being in production. So we need testing, we need stress testing, and so on, and also integrate it in with the account page of the VESC and so on. So quite a bit of work still there, which we need to get to. And the infrastructure will likely be available in October, November. So it's very difficult to predict. It's currently not yet finalized by the infrastructure provider yet. What will this new tier 1 computer have hardware-wise? So it will feature 336 CPU nodes. There are 2 partitions with 2 memory, 2 kinds of memories. So the big memory nodes will have 512 gigabytes, and the low memory ones will have 256 gigabytes, which is still quite a bit, for a total of 43,000 cores. Again, AMD processors, so beware. And also there will be GPU nodes for a total of 80 GPUs NVIDIA Ampere, which is 1 rung up to the GPUs we currently have in Joltik. Quite interesting, quite exciting. With this supercomputer, actually the tier 1 compute will have the majority of infrastructures that are in demand. So both CPU and GPU architecture are offered, and we can start promoting this as the go-to platform within the VESC. What are the access models for the tier 1? I'm not going to go into much detail, but there are 5. So as an academic user, you can get a starting rent very easily to test your software and to get started, to do some scaling tests. You can get project access, which has been there for quite a bit, for considerable compute time resources. You have to write a project, and we're happy to help you with that, to review it and so on. And quite new is the collaborative grant. This is for collaborations between at least 3 research groups from at least 2 institutes in Flanders. They can get access to dedicated resources there as well. Next project calls, we have 3 project calls for project access every year. The next one is 4th of October. Academic users, please notice this is free of charge, but you have to write a project. Commercial users mostly have to pay, but there is this access, also free explorer access, again, to test drive the system. And beyond that, commercial users can get full access on a pay-what-you-use level, or also via reservations. All feedback or questions here, please send to hpc@ugent.be. We're really happy to help you here. Tier 1 Cloud. As I mentioned, this is new within the VESC. This infrastructure offers on-demand resources in a flexible and cloud-like manner. It's a platform as a service. So it's a bit similar to what Amazon or Amazon Web Services offers, but not that high level. So we are not Amazon. It's really for power users that can then deploy by themselves resources and adapt these to scientific use cases. So for instance, like virtual machines, virtual storage systems, and connect these to private public networks. There are a number of ready-to-use catalog templates. So for instance, to run databases or web services. Access here is again project-based, and it's open to all. Project call deadlines, actually the deadline is today, but I'm pretty sure there will be a prolongation there. And also 4th of October is also a deadline. If you need help or you want a pair of eyes to look at your proposal, please send it to hpc@ugent.be. This is to give you an inside look on what the cloud looks like. So you can connect using your VESC account credentials. The system runs on OpenStack, and then you get a view as on the right where you can see the instances, images that you can run and you can, once you get access inside a project, you can spin up VMs, spin down VMs as you like it. What about beyond VSC? Stuff is happening in Europe. I think 2 or 3 years ago, the European Union has made HPC a priority and has invested more than 2 billion euros. These are just 2 of those projects that have resulted from this. So the European Competence Centers. This is a Europe-wide project where every country has a national single point of contact for everything related to high-performance computing, high-performance data analytics, and artificial intelligence competences. The purpose here is to map competences, to offer visibility of the services, and to act as a single point of contact within each country. So more than 32 partners here, European-wide, and within Belgium, we are also part of this Belgian National Competence Center, which spars 12 partners. So our Flemish universities, the Wallonian universities, CNIRO, and then FWO even, and Brussels as well. So we're a work package leader for competence mapping here and contributor to tech transfer, business development, and collaboration with industry. Especially with respect to competence mapping, if you have something within, if you're doing research or you have certain competences that you want to get highlighted within Europe, feel free to contact us. Finally, a call within Europe, which I wanted to highlight. Again, I think I've sent a mail on that earlier to HPC Announce. So there is another FF for Euro HPC call open. This is for small consortia that work together with industry or SMEs on HPC and so on. You can get financing up to 200,000 euros. This includes staff, which is quite important. And if you want, we can provide compute resources. More information on the call. If you're interested, again, give us a mail. This about covers the overview and our future plans. I propose that I first go to the user poll results, and after that we can do some Q&A. So the user poll was quite short, took 3 minutes. We had more than 100 respondents, which is quite nice turnout. And I want to thank you all for participating and providing us with your feedback, because this is really crucial. Yes, so a number of interesting points. How important are we for your research? Well, quite a bit, it turns out, not really surprising. And more than 90% of you rate you rate us at 90% high quality or better, which is nice to hear. What are certain aspects? How do you rate certain aspects? So the quality of support is at 80% good or excellent. Response time, this is a bit lower, so more like 75%. But as you can clearly see, swiftness of software installations, there we are closer to the 50% mark. So you clearly indicate, please try and improve this as much as possible. The quality of the software installations is on par, I guess, because there are, please do not be alarmed but by the graphs, but a number of people have no experience with this. So this kind of skews the visual picture a bit. And then onto the specific feedback. Would your research benefit from specific IT hardware or services that we currently do not provide? What you can see here is more GPUs and dedicated queues for GPU porting and so on. Lower queue times and Conda support. These are the specific hardware or services that we mentioned. But you have provided even more feedback in freeform fields, which I've tried to summarize in the next few slides. I wanted to highlight that I'm not going to be able to answer all of them at the moment, but please be aware that we are taking your feedback into consideration, and where possible, we will act on them. So how could we further improve our services with respect to infrastructure? Well, we could summarize this as more. We want more nodes, more clusters, more GPUs. Well, there is a new GPU cluster coming, so hopefully that at least alleviates the demand a bit. Higher file transfer speeds, and then two very specific comments: so fast, parallel, and accessible communication to Scratch on Victini. By design, actually, Victini has a very well, is only connected with NFS to the file systems. Team, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but Victini is not.
Ewald,
Yep.
Ewald, can
Shoot.
I answer this one? So the point is here that Victini saves some costs on network. It has a relatively slow network with a relatively high latency, which means that if you want to send or receive something on it, it doesn't respond really quickly. So this is the internal network, and this is how it's connected to the disk subsystem as well. So by network design, it's not capable to install any fast parallel file system, because the network would be the bottleneck here. And this is why when you need, we always tell to the users that if you need something fast communication to Scratch, or or you want to use multiple nodes calculations with the MPI, then you should use any other cluster but Victini. Plus, we have the new SSD disk subsystem, which is even faster than the QCon Scratch Arcanine. It's also not accessible from Victini for exactly the same reasons, because it wouldn't work to do due to the network limitations. I hope it was not so much technical, but the take-home message is that on Victini, the network is slow, therefore we cannot give quick disk access. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification, Palash. Another point here is feedback is more storage in the home directory. Actually, we do not like you to store a lot in the home directory. We promote use of data and Scratch, because these file systems are better suited to receive your data. Feedback with respect to user support, quite unsurprising. Speed up software installation. Yes, we heard you. And speed up your response time in general. Provide support or better support for first-time users and non-computational science researchers. That's a difficult one. We can't really treat our users in a different way. But we do try to do our best in general to service you. And more staff, yes, that would be really great, but we are also limited there by what is possible and allowed. I wanted to highlight a specific question or a specific feedback from a user. And I always say it's fun to hear praise, but it's even more important to hear bad stuff. If we drop the ball somewhere, or if there's something wrong, really tell us, because only then we can act on this. And this is a quite important statement, which I wanted to highlight here. So the user says months for a single installation just takes too long. A researcher cannot invent months of alternative work when the software is not available. Again, we try to do our best. We are having to get software installed as quickly as possible, but it is not always easy. But what this statement does tell is that having software in place is really crucial, especially for starting researchers, and hence our annoyance, because proper software installations can take a lot of time. We do not prevent you to install it yourself, but we try to do our best here to speed it up. The consultancy which we've hired for Inuits only can go that far because, in all honesty, the volume of requests is a lot. So 266 in a year, that's quite a bit. So that's actually more than we actually bargained for. But I don't want to make the statement here. We want to tune this down. Far from it. We want to actively keep on doing this. I wanted to mention here as well, this statement is also exactly why we've entered into the EasyBuild project, because we really believe that it's quite important that we are able to share the load between data centers, because this exact problem, having software installed and having it there as soon as possible, is it's there in every HPC center, and it's only by working together that we can speed it up. This is also something which we will highlight within the European Competence Center context. How could we further improve HPC services with respect to the user experience? So shorter queue times or shorter queue times for companies. Yes, well, this ties in with the demand and with the amount of clusters we offer. We can't really do anything with respect to that except have more infrastructure. A way to estimate the queue time. Yes, this is an evergreen. So we every year we get this request. How can we estimate when our job will start? This is actually a very difficult problem. It's very difficult to estimate based on the amount of jobs that are submitted when your job exactly will start. We don't offer this. Why? Because the tools that claim to offer this provide you with a lie, or with an estimate that's only correct in like 70% of the time. Sorry, an estimate that's only accurate in 70% of the time is still an inaccurate estimate. So hence we do not provide this because we really do not believe in it. The only way to get through the queue is submit and as soon as possible. With respect to queue times for companies, companies have on the tier 2 systems and also on tier 1 have a pay what you use schedule, which means you only pay for the compute time you use. But then indeed you have to wait in the queue. There is an alternative, and that is that you ask for a reservation. For instance, if companies need specific nodes on a specific day because they expect to have a big project, then it is possible to ask for a reservation for that full node. But then you also pay for the full node even if you're not using it. So that's quite an important part to realize. So let's say you want to have one node available tomorrow. Yes, you can ask for that, but then you have to wait. You have to pay for the entire node for 24 hours, even though you're maybe using it for 10 minutes. But sometimes this is exactly what you want, and it's definitely possible to do that. By the way, we have had researchers asking for the same schedule or the same feature, and yes, this feature is also open for research groups. If you need specific resources, you can request them upfront, but then also you have to pay for the full node as companies do. Project applications for virtual organizations to get compute time to reduce the load. I do understand what the purpose is here, but we're not going to go there because this is basically what tier 1 is there for. So this is my maybe biggest take-home message. If you're worried about the queue time, please consider writing a tier 1 proposal. This is the best way to get access to more computational resources, and we're really happy to help you with optimizing your project proposal. And I do understand it's not fun to have to write a project. It takes a bit of effort, I understand, but this is outside of my control. And the only thing I can say is really happy to help you with that. We're helping you write projects. Automatic distribution of jobs across clusters in terms of occupancy and efficiency. This is something which we're going to discuss first internally, whether it's possible or not. Longer wall clock times, we're not going to go there, I'm afraid. We're going to stick to the 3-day wall clock limit, which is actually already quite long if you consider this internationally. And a better estimate of the impact of maintenance on, for instance, license service. Yes, this is a valid point. We dropped the ball in the last maintenance. I have to admit that we didn't take into account that this would impact a license server. So we're going to do our best and take it into account next time. Training, quite a bit of feedback here, which was very interesting. So you might have noticed that we haven't done a lot of training in the last year, mostly due to Corona and the Tier 1 workload. I don't expect this to change a lot in the remainder of the year, but lots of suggestions here. So online courses on how to use HPC efficiently, specific workshops targeted to specific research groups. I'm afraid that's beyond our scope. We can't do that, but we can do intro trainings for specific research groups. That's definitely possible. Introduction to parallel programming, compiling your own complex software models, using Git and Jupyter notebooks on the HPC web portal. I'm not really sure whether we will do Jupyter notebooks, but definitely we will, as I mentioned earlier, we will incorporate more the web portal into our training offer. And I'm very happy to read that several of you appreciated the praise mails on the courses. I do also appreciate that praise organizes these trainings in a remote fashion throughout Europe. I will continue forwarding them, but not risking spamming you. With respect to software, provides easy local module installation. I can't really comment on that, whether it's, maybe Kenneth can say something here.
Say something on
local module installation.
Oh yeah, I guess this relates to Python and maybe R, so that people are able to install these packages themselves. They can, so we don't actively prevent this. But you have to be a bit careful for several reasons. First of all, if you're jumping from one Python to another, one Python version to another, you may have to redo those installations, so you have to keep track on how they were done. Same thing for R, so make sure you do them properly. And also the different CPU architectures we have in our system, Skylake and now AMD Rome as well, and the notebook cluster complicate things a bit as well, because you may have to redo those installations differently for different clusters. So unless you feel you really know what you're doing, I would suggest submitting an installation request for these type of packages, because these are the ones that are typically very easy to install. So these usually fall well below the 7 hours that we take to tackle an installation. If you want to take matters into your own hands, you can. And if you have questions on that, we can help you. But in general, I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Okay, thanks, Kenneth. Other feedback here is update all the software on a regular basis. That's quite cost intensive. I think the team does try to keep the software updated as much as possible.
Yeah, a comment here, we do this for certain things. Like, for example, TensorFlow and PyTorch, so these AI workloads that we know a lot of people are using. Also for things like R and Python, so there are packages that we update without getting a request for it, because a lot of people are using them. But in general, it's not feasible to do this. We have, I lost count, but it's more than 1,000 different software packages installed without versions even, so it's just not feasible to keep everything up to date all the time. So we heavily rely on people submitting requests for doing that.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. Feedback with respect to documentation. So expand the documentation with links to external sources and, for instance, provide step-by-step documentation on pip and conda. Workflows include example workflows including Git and GitHub and Jupyter notebooks. Again, these are things we will have to consider within the team whether it's possible or not. And if so, we will at least provide pointers and hooks in the documentation. But we'll have to review this in more detail.
I would like to comment a bit on that one as well. So it is, I would like to say that step-by-step documentation, pip and conda, workflows including GitHub and workflows including Jupyter notebooks. It's, I know it sounds stupid, but you just search in Google and then you will find lots of these online courses and trainings. So if you do something that, yeah, it will be hard to keep up on the internet. Is things are much more update. So I have to say that I think the best source is the internet. I mean, I'm not sure that we have the resources to regularly update. So what you find on the internet would be much more up to date and probably much more detailed what we can do. I know it sounds a bit harsh, but I mean, these things are really extended. So I mean, it's not something like really specific. For example, we do in the documentation some specifics for MATLAB or OpenFOAM. These are much less common than those kind of things. So we try to focus on with things and give extra information over specific software packages or processes where it's less common and it's harder to find information on the internet, but these things are extremely common.
Thank you, Balázs. If there are specific documentation sources or trainings that we do find on these quite specific topics, we will definitely share them. But indeed, Balázs is right. We should be able to provide something that's reliable and up to speed. But again, we will discuss this internally and see what we can do. Finally, we have quite a bit of questions for specific consultancy, so help on advanced programming support, for instance, testing, improving code, or support for compiling complex software models. So there's actually research related work. We would be delighted to do that, but unfortunately this is really beyond our scope. We don't have the manpower to do this. So I'd rather say upfront no, instead of keeping your hopes up high. But there is quite a bit of demand here, and again, I do hope within the Euro HPC project to see what other HPC centers do here, and maybe if there are other partners or external parties that can really contribute here. If there are, we will definitely refer to them. And provides links and connections to them. And this at least wraps it up for as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm very happy to answer your questions.